Hey, it's Father Rob. Welcome back for another edition of Read Mark and Inwardly Digest. Each week I've been telling you a little bit about Mark to add a little depth to what you're reading. What have you noticed about how it is affecting you? What has the practice meant to you? Have you found that these scriptures come up for you in other ways during the day? I hope you're finding a way to make the practice more concrete and that you've found a way to make it work for you. So if you find that maybe your practice is inconsistent, that it doesn't seem to be working in the way that you're doing it, switch it up a little bit. Try it in a different way. Move it to a different time of day. Find a different spot in the house or out of the house. When I was a kid, I remember sometimes going to my dad's office in the afternoon to meet him, and at the end of the day, that's how he would end his workday. That was his consistent practice of ending his workday, is he would read the Bible and do his prayer time before he left the office. It was pretty quiet, nobody else was around. He found something that worked for him. So if you find the practice itself is a little spotty, maybe try switching it up. Let's take a brief look at this section of Mark that we've been in. This really is a section about discipleship and the difficulty of discipleship and what the way of the cross will look like. You'll remember last time Peter was not very happy with Jesus' first passion prediction. He says Jesus is the Christ, but then Jesus tells them about his need to suffer and die, and then Peter winds up being called Satan. Well, that section is the beginning of another big Markan sandwich. It's a triple-decker, in fact. So right before that first passion prediction, we get the healing of a blind man. Keep that in mind. And then along the way, we get two more passion predictions. And after the third passion prediction in chapter 10, that section ends with what? But the healing of another blind man. And this one is specifically named, which is a little strange for healing stories. Normally we don't get a name. We don't know exactly who these people are. Bartimaeus, son of Timaeus. It grounds the story. This is about real people. Next time you're here at the church, go in the chapel and look at the center of the three windows in the chapel. That window depicts this story of the healing of blind Bartimaeus. What do you think? Why would that story have been chosen for those chapel windows? I wonder why that was important to St. Paul's at the time. The blind Bartimaeus story forms the bottom piece of bread to that triple-decker sandwich. We get these two healing of people who are blind, and then in the center is those three passion predictions interlaced with some other stories. And within those stories, we find that the disciples themselves are confused about why Jesus would make these passion predictions. What does this mean? What would it mean to have a Messiah who suffers and dies? They can't see it. I think that's what Mark is getting at with the stories of people who are blind, who get their sight from Jesus with the three passion predictions in between. He's making a point about our blindness as disciples and Jesus' ability to help us see the truth. And the truth is the way of the cross. Notice too within this section, there is the famous, the last shall be first and the first shall be last. 10:43 through 44, we get the story about servant leadership, about the disciples bickering over which one of them is first. Jesus tells them that those leaders who serve are the ones who are first. Again, last first, first last. Messiah King who is crucified and suffers. Jesus redefines for us what success means. The kingdom of God is an upside down reality. I enjoyed talking about this section with my son because I reminded him of the movie Cars, the Disney Pixar movie, if you've ever seen it. It's a terrific movie, so if you haven't seen it, I won't spoil it. But the ending really does exemplify this Christian teaching. That's a great movie to watch with your kids or your grandkids or just to watch by yourself. It's a good movie, even if it's a kid's movie. So I recommend it if you want to think about this section of Mark in a more reflective way. This part of Mark that we're going into talks about the last week of Jesus' life, which leads me to a recommendation. This book is fantastic, and it's perfect for going deeper in the Gospel of Mark. If you really want to do some deeper study, I highly recommend this book. It's also perfect for this liturgical season of Lent that we're going to enter into, and specifically Holy Week. And I want to read a little passage of it for you as you think about the procession and these events of conflict that are happening in this part of Mark. 2 processions entered Jerusalem on a spring day in the year 30. It was the beginning of the week of Passover, the most sacred week of the Jewish year. In the centuries since, Christians have celebrated this day as Palm Sunday, the first day of Holy Week. With its climax of Good Friday and Easter, it is the most sacred week of the Christian year. One was a peasant procession, the other an imperial procession. From the east, Jesus rode a donkey down the Mount of Olives, cheered by his followers. Jesus was from the peasant village of Nazareth. His message was about the kingdom of God, and his followers came from the peasant class. They had journeyed to Jerusalem from Galilee, about 100 miles to the north, a journey that is the central section and the central dynamic of Mark's gospel. Mark's story of Jesus and the kingdom of God has been aiming for Jerusalem, pointing toward Jerusalem. It has now arrived. On the opposite side of the city, from the west, Pontius Pilate, the Roman governor of Idumea, Judea, and Samaria, entered Jerusalem at the head of a column of imperial cavalry and soldiers. Jesus' procession proclaimed the kingdom of God. Pilate's proclaimed the power of empire. The 2 processions embody the central conflict of the week that led to Jesus' crucifixion. We think of Jesus as Jesus meek and mild. He's not meek and mild in this section. He's really doing some acts of public protest. This entry into Jerusalem, where history tells us that on the other side of the city a different kind of procession would have been going on, is a direct affront to the powers that be, the political powers that be. And then Jesus is going into the temple and flipping over tables. These are acts of public protest that would have angered the political authorities and the religious authorities. Jesus meek and mild? I don't think so. We're moving past chapter 12 now, and Mark is only 16 chapters long. There's only 2 weeks left in our study of Mark. I hope you're enjoying this practice, and I hope you are keeping it up. And if there's any way I can support you in it, please reach out to me. And you can find more resources to study the Gospel of Mark and more about the Good Book Club at goodbookclub.org. I'm rooting you on and praying for you, and God bless you this week.